Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about how to take care of your Syngoniums. Syngonium is a genus of plants that comes to us from Central America primarily. The most common one you're going to find is the Podophyllum variety, and it's called this because the leaf kind of looks like a foot, Podophyllum in Latin. It comes in a bunch of different varieties and colors and variegation styles. The more rare those colors are, the higher the price is going to be. First up, we have Light. These Syngoniums do really well in lower light conditions as well as really bright light conditions. Of course, don't put direct sunlight on these plants, but they do really well. You can see these edge plants, they're really not getting a lot of this direct grow light, and they're still thriving even on the edges of the garden. That same thing would occur in even like a north window or a lower light central part of your house. And when you get them to the center of your trays and directly under your lights, they have the ability to put out really large leaves, which is awesome to watch grow, and they can get very tall. But remember, if you starve your plants of light, they will get larger internodal spacing, which is the space between each node. So with less light, with most plant varieties, you're going to see more internodal spacing. Next up is water. The Syngonium does really well in a bunch of different watering conditions. I tend to underwater my Syngoniums and they tend to prefer that, but I've definitely overwatered these plants and never really had any problems. They respond really well in the aroid mix being on the drier side. You will get a little bit of yellowing on the leaves if it goes too dry. It will look like under fertilization, but just simply give it some watering, and it's very common for the roots to bust out of the bottom of the container. That's how you know you're on the right track, if you're getting those yellow and white looking roots with fuzzies, ideally. Root rot doesn't really seem to be a common theme on Syngonium. I don't know if I've ever seen a root rotted Syngonium. And that leads us into fertilizer. The Syngonium thrives with a lot of fertilizer, but it also can do okay with a lower amount of fertilizer. But it definitely can take that large amount of fertilizer. I always refer to the Syngonium as kind of the weed of the houseplant world because it just wants to grow and survive. This is probably like 15 different plants all in this tray, maybe 8 feet across, and they just grow like jungle plants. Like look at this one even growing across like a vine. So they can vine, they can grow in baskets, they can grow vertically, they can hang down. It's a very versatile, fun plant to grow, and it's very easy to grow. On the fertilizer, we tend to use a 3-1-2 ratio. We use Osmocote or Nutricote as a slow release in the aroid mix. And of course, all of these plants are in our LECA AB fertilizer, thriving and really enjoying that high amount of nitrogen. That 3 in the 3-1-2 is really going to give those leaves a deep green color and provide that plant with just enough power and strength to grow more and more leaves and grow vertically. As I mentioned, the Syngonium does great in the 3-2-1 aroid mix. This is a very basic aroid mix and also does pretty well in soil because it doesn't succumb to root rot that often. And then these guys are planted in full LECA. Look at how beautiful this plant is. Really just thriving, tons of adventitious roots and actual soil roots. The roots I think are like 4 feet long. This plant is very happy, never really has any issues, so it does well in LECA, does well in aroid mix. I would guess it does well in just about any grow media. I've never had temperature issues with the Syngonium. I've taken it all the way up to about 92 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've brought it all the way down into, I believe, like the 50s and maybe even the high 40s outdoors at our house. So it's never really had any issues, and it's definitely not humidity sensitive. It tends to probably prefer a slightly lower humidity because it is from that Central America region. So somewhere around the 55 to 65 would be great for this plant. It definitely, again, doesn't require that 70-80% of something like an anthurium. As you can see from these adventitious roots, the Syngonium propagates very easily because it is an epiphyte and wants to climb up a tree. It's always looking for batches of moisture or humidity, and would be a great candidate actually for the propagation balls or even the saran wrap method of binding around the stem and allowing the roots to tap into that propagation ball or that saran wrap. But simply like we typically do, and I've done a side-by-side comparison of using an air stone with the Syngonium, just straight into the water. Ideally add an air stone if you want to speed that up, but these plants will propagate very quickly, put out about 2 to 3 inches of roots off of that stem. Once you have that, go into your aroid mix. And that's how we propagate all of these plants. Onto variegation, the Syngonium Podophyllum comes in a bunch of different varieties. I'd probably count between like 7 and 10 different coloring patterns, and the variegation can really vary a lot even within one plant. It doesn't tend to be a stable variegation, so keep that in mind when you're cutting. Always look for the different stripings through the stem. On this Syngonium, you can kind of see the different colorings of the stem, the green, the white, the different purple parts of the stem, which then correlate to the different colorings on the leaves. So be cognizant when you are cutting and try and cut back some of that green color on your Syngoniums. If you're getting all green shoots, cut that back down. Just right here within arm's reach, I have T24. This is the Syngonium as we talked about. Pink splash or pink spot illusion. This is one of my favorite plants. It's really pretty. The Aurea would look more like that inner Aurea-like leaf on this Syngonium, but again, they vary a lot in the colorings that you'll get off of one plant. Pink splash, and the tricolor looks a lot like this. It just has more of like a limey color as the third color within the leaf. And then there's Batik, Milk Confetti, Mosquito, and a bunch of ones that are even still being discovered today. It's typically not found in tissue culture, so it's mostly propagated through stem cuttings of mother plants like this. Pests are typically not an issue on the Syngonium, but it does happen. This is a plant I got from a grower down in Florida, and it came to me with pests. This was actually a Confetti, and you can see a little bit of the coloring, but when you start to lose the variegation in the leaf, this can happen on a Paraiso also. It might be an indication that you have pests on your leaves. So that's how you can see all of the coloring is gone from these leaves. And that curling of where they just never unfurl, this plant still has pests and never really recovered. This is actually a milk confetti, and the difference between the milk confetti and the confetti is the pinking on the inside of this petiole. It's very hard to see, and it's a very silly difference, but many times that difference can be the difference between a $100 4-inch pot or a $20 4-inch pot. But keep an eye out for all the common houseplant pests, such as spider mites and thrips. Those are very common, but always look at that backside of the leaf. And these plants are unfortunately toxic to pets as well as humans, so be very careful. When you break the stem of a Syngonium or take a cutting, you'll notice a white substance that comes out of the leaf stem, and that can be very irritating to your skin, and make sure you don't ingest it, so be very careful with that. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about Syngonium today. If you did like this video, please click the like button down below and consider subscribing since we make 2 videos about houseplants every week. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.